What if ancient civilizations weren't just looking up at the stars, but maybe communicating with them, or leaving messages for something or someone far beyond their own time? Messages so huge, so intricate, that maybe only a mind way more advanced could ever, figure them out. Messages that only now, really, we're starting to get a handle on. Welcome to the cool, weird, and possible.
Today, we're plunging into one of archaeology's really great enigmas, the Nazca lines down in Peru. For decades, these massive ground drawings have just baffled researchers. But recent breakthroughs, using artificial intelligence actually, are not just uncovering hundreds of new figures, they're kind of reshaping our whole understanding of what these lines might have meant and who they were for.
So yeah, prepare yourself for a journey. We're talking strange patterns, ancient rituals, and some seriously cutting-edge tech. We're about to peel back some layers here.
Okay, so let's set the scene for you. Picture this, a huge, really dry plateau, the Nazca Desert in southern Peru. It's incredibly arid, almost no wind. And this place is home to hundreds of what we call geoglyphs, these enormous artworks etched right into the desert surface. They were made by the pre-Incan Nazca culture. They thrived there for like 1,000 years, roughly between 500 BCE and 500 CE. They weren't using paint or anything. What they did was carefully remove the dark sort of reddish rocks from the surface. And that exposes the lighter sandy soil underneath. So you get this contrast, right, between the dark rock and the pale sand. That's what makes the shapes visible, like a giant natural sketch pad.
And when you say giant, you really mean it. It's honestly mind-boggling. Some of these figures are as big as the Statue of Liberty, or, get this, the Empire State Building. And it's not just a few drawings scattered around. They're spread out over nearly 190 square miles. That's almost 500 square kilometers. Just vast. Now, here's where the real mystery kicks in. The thing that's fueled all these theories, maybe even some, wilder ideas for decades. You literally cannot tell what they are when you're standing on the ground next to them. You just see lines. You can only really see the full picture, the actual shapes, from way up high. So, okay, if the ancient Nazca people couldn't fly, who are these massive drawings actually for? Was it just like for their gods looking down? Or maybe something more alien even?
It's a great question. And what's also remarkable, beyond just the scale and the mystery, is how long they've lasted. The environment there in Nazca is unique. Super dry, hardly any wind, stable climate. It's acted like a perfect natural preservation chamber. So these incredibly detailed artworks have survived, mostly intact, for thousands of years. We can actually study them today. Now, local people probably always knew about them, but they were first systematically studied by a Peruvian archaeologist, Toribio Mejías Espe, back in 1927. But they only really hit the big time, became famous with commercial air travel in the 1930s. Pilots and passengers started seeing them from their planes, and that aerial view really captured people's imagination, especially researchers like Maria Reiche, a German mathematician and archaeologist. She dedicated over 40 years, pretty much her whole life, to mapping, studying, and trying to protect these lines. She, along with an American historian named Paul Kosak, they really pushed an early theory that became widely accepted for a long time. They thought many of these lines formed a huge astronomical calendar. To help the Nazca track star solstices, maybe for farming or religious reasons. The idea was the lines pointed to important celestial events, a giant observatory drawn on the desert floor. And that seemed to explain why they had to be seen from above, right?
Right. So for ages, that was the main idea. Giant star maps, cosmic calendars on the ground. Makes a certain kind of sense. But, even with all that work, all that dedication from people like Maria Reiche, the full picture, why so many different figures, why some are so complex, it always felt a bit mysterious still. Like, if it was just astronomy, why draw a monkey? Or a hummingbird? It kind of felt like maybe we were missing something, a key piece of the puzzle.
Exactly. And for a very long time, actually finding and mapping these things was incredibly slow work, painstaking. The Nazca Pampa, like you said, is just huge, hundreds of square miles. Trying to manually scan high-resolution aerial photos or drone footage looking for faint lines, it's unbelievably inefficient. Think about trying to find the specific sentence in a library full of unmarked books. Historically, archaeologists were lucky if they found maybe 1 or 2 new figures a year, on average about 1.5 per year, which is just incredibly slow progress given the scale. But this is where things take a really interesting turn. The breakthrough came from this collaboration. Researchers from Yamagata University in Japan, led by Professor Masato Nakai, teamed up with IBM Research, and they decided to use advanced artificial intelligence. Now, we need to be clear here, this wasn't like a generative AI, the kind that creates images or writes text. It was a specific type called a classification neural network, Basically, an AI trained to identify patterns and categorize data.
Okay, that's important. So it's not like some sci-fi AI just dreaming up shapes in the desert sand. It's not looking at random rocks and going, ooh, that looks like a space dog.
Yeah.
Did it actually find real things?
No space dogs. No. That's a really good question, though, because it highlights how this works. The AI wasn't inventing anything. Think of it more like a superpowered assistant. First, they trained it. They fed it tons of data on the geoglyphs we already knew about all the confirmed birds, monkeys, lines, trapezoids. The AI learned to recognize the visual signatures, the subtle patterns, the changes in texture and color, the specific way these lines were made in the desert terrain. It learned what a Nazca line looks like to a computer. Then, its job was to sift through enormous amounts of new aerial and drone imagery, way faster than any human could. Its real power was identifying high-probability areas, places where the data strongly suggested, hey, there might be an undiscovered geoglyph here. And get this, it managed to eliminate about 98% of the imagery as likely empty. That massively cut down the workload for the human experts. Instead of looking at potentially millions of hours of footage, they had a much more focused data set, around 2,500 hours, to check. So the AI basically generated a list of promising candidates, but, and this is absolutely crucial, the AI didn't make the final call. That was still up to the archaeologist. The AI pointed them in the right direction. Then a team went out there, on foot, used drones for closer looks, and did what's called ground truthing. They physically went to the locations the AI flagged, examined the ground, measured things, documented everything to confirm if it was a real ancient geoglyph or just, a random shadow or natural feature. That human verification is key. And the results, honestly, they are just stunning.
Yeah.
In only 6 months between September 2022 and February 2023, this AI-assisted approach led to the confirmation of 303 new figurative geoglyphs. 303. To put that in context, that nearly doubles the total number of known figurative geoglyphs. We went from about 430 known ones to now 733. That's a 16-fold increase in the discovery rate compared to how things used to be done. It's absolutely unprecedented.
Okay, hold on. Let me process that. 303 new ones in half a year. That's insane. Wow, it totally changes the feel of it, doesn't it? From this ancient, static mystery to something that's still unfolding right now. So what kind of figures are we talking about? Are they just more hummingbirds and spiders, or did they find stuff that maybe helps us finally understand what these were really for?
That's exactly where this gets super interesting. Because yes, the sheer number of new finds, combined with analyzing where they are and what they depict, has let researchers really refine the theories. We're moving beyond just the it was all an astronomical calendar idea. They've now identified two pretty distinct categories of geoglyphs, and they seem to have had different functions. Okay, so first you've got what they call line-type geoglyphs. These tend to be the bigger ones, averaging maybe 90 meters long, and they mostly show wild animals. About 64% are things like birds, whales, monkeys, animals from the region. The really important thing here is where they are found. They're almost always located along these formal straight pathways, these linear and trapezoidal networks that cross the desert. And significantly, these pathways often lead towards important ceremonial places like the big Kawachi Temple complex, or towards river junctions, crucial water sources, obviously. So the thinking now is that these large animal figures were probably used for community rituals, part of pilgrimages. Imagine big groups walking these routes, following these huge figures as part of a sacred journey, maybe making offerings. It suggests a pretty organized society, with shared spiritual practices tied to the landscape itself. Then there's this second category, the relief-type geoglyphs. These are much smaller, average size, maybe only 9 meters or so, often more intricate. What's fascinating is what they depict. About 82% of these show human-related things. We're talking human figures, domesticated animals like llamas or alpacas, and even depictions of heads.
Severed heads.
Yes, distinct head motifs appear. And unlike the big line types along formal routes, these smaller relief figures are usually found near winding, sort of informal footpaths, the kind individuals or maybe small groups would use for daily travel or more personal rituals. So researchers are now suggesting these acted almost like, well, like ancient billboards or trail markers.
Whoa, wait. Ancient billboards, that's brilliant. So they weren't just for God's way up high. They were messages for people walking right there. What kind of messages? And okay, you have to tell me about this killer whale holding a knife figure you mentioned earlier. That sounds intense, like something out of a weird comic book. What's the story there?
Yeah, it does sound pretty wild, doesn't it? But it's a perfect example of this billboard idea and how it connects to their beliefs. This figure, it's about 72 feet long, a killer whale clearly holding something that looks like a ceremonial knife. And the key is, this connects directly to Nazca pottery, We find lots of Nazca ceramics showing orcas, often in very ritualistic scenes. Sometimes the pottery shows these orcas holding knives or other objects, maybe associated with ceremonies, possibly even hinting at ritual sacrifice practices. So seeing that same image etched into the ground along a pathway, it wasn't just, look, a whale. It was likely a powerful religious symbol, a marker related to important myths or rituals, placed where people would walk past and see it. And the other relief figures, the human shapes, the heads, they reinforce this idea. Some human figures look like shamans or are in ceremonial poses. The head motifs likely relate to ancestor veneration or trophy head practices known from Nazca culture. So these smaller glyphs seem to serve a different purpose. They communicate specific cultural or religious information to individuals or small groups moving through the landscape. It paints a much richer picture, doesn't it? Not just one reason for all the lines, but a complex system. Different glyphs for different audiences and different purposes. Large community rituals, individual guidance, symbolic markers.
Wow, okay. That makes so much more sense than just it's a calendar. It's like a whole communication system woven into the desert itself. So what does all this mean for us, today, beyond just cool ancient art history? How does this tech, this AI breakthrough at Nazca, how does it impact us?
Well, the implications are actually pretty huge, especially for archaeology. This study is being called a genuine game changer. It really signals a kind of revolution in how archaeological discoveries can be made, maybe as significant as when aerial photography first revealed the lines properly back in the day. It proves that AI, used carefully, can be an incredibly powerful tool for processing massive data sets, stuff that would just overwhelm human teams. The AI can spot these really subtle patterns, faint traces that maybe even a trained eye could miss, scanning miles and miles of images. And importantly, it frees up the human experts, the archaeologists, to focus on what they do best. The essential fieldwork, the ground truthing, the careful excavation, and crucially, the interpretation, figuring out what it all means. And the story isn't even finished at Nazca. Professor Sakai's team thinks there are probably another 250 or so geoglyphs flagged by the AI that still need that on-the-ground confirmation. Imagine having a complete map. And beyond just finding things, AI could be vital for protecting these sites. They're incredibly fragile. AI could help predict areas most at risk from things like, say, flash floods, which are becoming more common with climate change, or monitor damage from human activity. It could be a key tool for preservation.
That's incredible. So the same tech that's uncovering the past could help save it for the future. It really makes you think, doesn't it? We're still finding secrets from thousands of years ago, and it's the tools of tomorrow that are helping us unlock the mysteries of yesterday. Makes you wonder, what other ancient messages are out there just waiting for the right kind of eyes, maybe AI eyes, to finally see them? This deep dive into the Nazca lines.
Wow. It's definitely been a journey into the cool, the weird, and the absolutely possible. We went from these ancient puzzles right up to cutting-edge AI. It really shows how linked up human history and technology are becoming, and just how much more there is still out there to discover. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. If you enjoyed sort of peeling back the layers of this ancient mystery with us, make sure you subscribe to our channel. We've got plenty more amazing stories and fascinating discoveries coming your way.